You got challenges that you're going to run across.
Okay, we're live here for another episode of Elite Psyche, the Mental Toughness Podcast. And this is a podcast that talks to, in my opinion, elite individuals, the ones who have gone through certain things. And, you know, I believe that anybody who is successful in this world has to have that mental toughness because you've gone through some things, you've gone through some challenges to get to where you are. And so whether it's an athlete or a businessman or today a mayor, it's a thing that I believe everybody has to go through because there's challenges in life. And I think that's where most people fall off on that mindset, that mental toughness where, you know, hey, you got to keep fighting. You got to keep swinging. And today, my guest, I want to read a little bit on before I bring him up because I believe that this is where he is now in his life. This guy is well known. He's all over YouTube, and you know he was the mayor of Detroit. I still call him the mayor, but you know he had experienced a few things, and today we want to talk about his book, Off the Grid, man. You know I'm a reader, got a book club. I'm always talking about books. And when I got this book and I ordered it, I couldn't put it down. I mean, I got everything in this thing highlighted like crazy. It's just so many highlights in here and things. He has some great stories. Probably one of the best guys that I've heard with metaphors and analogies because people speak that way. And so you can pick up a person, you can really understand them when they use different analogies and metaphors. And he used a lot through this book that really painted a picture for us. But I want to read something, and y'all need to bear with me for a minute because this might be a longer read. But I believe that this is where he is now, right before I bring him up. So I'm going to start here where it says, I graduated from college with honors and went on to law school where I graduated and passed the Michigan bar exam, the very first test I tested. I was elected to Michigan State House of Representatives at 26 years old and elected by my colleagues to be the leader of that body at 30 years old. At 31, I was elected mayor of Detroit. Now, there's a lot of firsts and youngest in my bio, but none of it mattered when I was wandering in the wilderness during my trial and subsequent incarceration. At that point, all I wanted to do was kill something. He said, I had no idea what really needed to be killed when I left Detroit. Killing my foolish pride, arrogance, ignorance, and insatiable appetite to do my thing should have made up the list of what had to be mortified in my life. But I was sincerely committed to keeping all my stuff. I was tenacious and passionate about being right. I did not care about one thing about being righteous. I just wanted to be right. I only cared about living life my way. I wasn't a criminal, but I wasn't living or trying to live up to the highest moral standard. In fact, moral excellence people made me itch. Moral excellent people made me itch. They got on my nerves and killed my buzz. I considered them to be soft, creamy puff, and absolutely no fun. But one day, truth showed up. June 2014, while incarcerated in federal prison, I was moved to bow down and humble myself of an encounter with the truth. The Lord Jesus Christ, an outcome of knowing truth, is that lies become so clear to me to see. Looking in the mirror becomes a very painful endeavor because once you experience new life, you can clearly see the dead corpse, that held the dangerously wrong ideas and inclinations in his soul for so long. The light of the truth shines bright, sometimes too bright. It makes you close your eyes, wander in self-imposed darkness, and finally seek help. The dead man was brave, confident, and full of swag. His spunk and bravado moved with purpose and tenacity. This new man was confused, thrown off, and needed support, assistance, and love. The new reality of who I've been and who I was called to be was confusing and uncomfortable at first. But I knew in my inner man that it was right. As I gathered myself and followed the instructions given to me by truth, I noticed I was handcuffed to and carrying the old man, KWAME of Detroit, along with me. He was dead weight for sure, burdensome and heavy as hell, but he was my dude, my main man, my oldest friend. But that wasn't the only reason I carried him along. I also carried the old KWAME of Detroit along with me because of some of the people, things, and attributes attached to him. I enjoyed them still being a part of me. I wasn't ready to let them go, so I had to carry the dead weight of this 300-pound old man to keep a part of his life with me. I was not only handcuffed to him, I was also handcuffed to his friends, his swag, and his character. This man, my journey, my walk, profoundly tough. It was grueling sometimes, fraught with difficulty, roadblocks, hills, and valleys. Sometimes the handcuffs dug into my skin so hard, the pain provoked me to cry out in agony. The blood spilled, the scars and the marks would never heal, but I continued to struggle through the pain. I was determined to carry him with me down the road until that day of truth. On that day, during my second year in the federal prison, there was no lightning, no thunder, just a simple perception, an instinct that filled me with the resolve of the courage to make a definite decision to let KWAME of Detroit go. He was too heavy. He was dead. I noticed I was the only one keeping him alive. Well, me and the community, people and religious folks who sent me out into the wilderness, but all of that part was of the formal things and not of the new thing. In my cell, going over the statement from the prosecutor and judge in my federal trial, I focused first on the judge's statement at my sentencing. Not one word addressed the crimes of which I was accused. Instead, she used her entire statement to call out my moral failings. I've been angry at her for so long and so many reasons, not to least which was the way she described me in the speech. But in that moment, I realized something that hurt me deeply. Every word of what she said about me was true. When the prosecutor explained to the jury, we don't have a smoking gun, and directed the jury to the judge to judge me by the company I kept, he had a valid point. Birds of a feather, he claimed, flocked together, and he was right. Many of the people who testified against me were people I should never have welcomed into my life. If a man's character was judged by the company he kept, then mine had been found severely lacking. As I read the statements again and again, something in me cracked open. I didn't deserve everything I've gone through in the federal court. I didn't deserve the language in prison, but for the first time, I realized I did deserve to be punished. My actions had hurt so many people, and actions always have consequences. I put the statements aside and went out and walked on the track for a while. The truth was what was said about me weighed me down and wore on me. I couldn't walk it off, so I headed to the chapel where I ran into Bruce Smith, a volunteer from Yukon, Oklahoma. Bruce saw me in my despair. He listened for a moment, and then he asked, had I had a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Sitting in the back of the chapel, I thought of how the judge had pointed out the fact that my lack of character and integrity had caused me to miss the opportunity to do something great. I considered how the sum of the people I spent my time with reflected who I was. I didn't like that said about me. I explained to Bruce that no, I didn't have a personal relationship with the Lord. I wasn't even sure if I knew what that meant. Bruce told me a simple story of truth. He talked to me about the gospel of Jesus Christ in a way no one had ever before. A gifted evangelist. He didn't need fancy words and metaphors, just the straight gospel. Bruce told me Jesus wanted me to be the Lord of my life. He wanted to heal me of my sinful nature, forgive me, and make me a new person. In that moment, I was finally broken enough to receive his message, and I realized just how much I wanted to be made new. That day, I accepted Christ as my Lord, my Savior, and my King, and I would spend the next several years studying the Word and growing in my faith, and I would need every bit of that knowledge and belief. Man, you know, when I read that, I said, this is where my brother KWAME Kilpatrick, ex-mayor of Detroit, is today. Man, he's a spiritual guy. He's out here teaching the Word, doing a lot of great things for society. And that's why I wanted to really do an interview with him today, because, you know, I want to talk about a lot of things, and especially from this book, because, again, I love the book. I'm a book reader. And so without further ado, I want to bring up ex-mayor or the mayor of Detroit. I just still call him the mayor of Detroit. and also a spiritual leader now. My brother, Mr. KWAME Kilpatrick. Are you there, sir? Let's see if we can bring him up on the screen. There he is.
I'm here. Wow.
Man, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Tony. I'm doing very well. That was it used to be kind of sobering hearing that, but now it's such an incredibly joyful thing to hear those words back. That was an incredible day. It's kind of emotional. That day was one of the lowest points in my life. And to walk in there, and God tailor-made this Vietnam veteran, right-wing conservative guy from Yukon, Oklahoma, but it didn't take no crap from nobody. He was just tailor-made for that moment. Somebody that in my previous life, I'd have just went in there and argued with him about politics.
Right.
I was poured out at that moment. I didn't have nothing left, and he was standing there waiting on me. And I literally never had a day like that one again after this moment. I had sadness, I've had even depression, but it was never the same. That day, everything changed in my life. Like I said, there was no lightning and thunder, but I knew something happened inside of me. And so from that point on, I got a job at the chapel the very next week, and ended up working in the various chapels that I was in over the next 6.5 years I was in. I was always in the chapel, teaching classes, learning the Bible, being a student of the Bible, taking classes from seminary, and preaching the word of God. I end up preaching, teaching Bible studies and everything else. And so that's what God has had me do since I walked out of that place.
Wow. I remember reading a little bit more of that in detail toward the end of the book. And you kind of painted a picture how that morning you just woke up and walked straight over there. You're like, you didn't see nobody. I don't know if anybody spoke to you, but you did a beeline straight over there.
Yeah. That day I went to the library first, and I was real messed up. My sons, my older sons, Jelani and Jaleel, twins, they were having a lot of problems. They ended up leaving the house, and they got them an apartment. My mother, they tricked grandma. She sent some money. They got them a little apartment in the hood in Dallas. They was in Oak Cliff, and they got an apartment, and they was out of the house. They had stopped going to school. It was just a terrible, and I couldn't do anything. My youngest son, Jonas, at that time, Joe was probably about 12. And so he was having problems. Joe had all A's all his life, and he just started getting D's without me locked up I'd been locked up for about a year at this time, a little more than a year. And it was just too much. I couldn't get out. I've been denied for every appeal. It was just, I couldn't go to the library. I just sat down, and I saw a book about the goals of incarceration and all of these different things I was supposed to. I closed that book. I was just like, there's nothing left. I got up and I walked straight to the chapel. I still don't know to this day why I went to the chapel except I was led. And so when I got in there, that was Bruce Smith. Hey, big guy, So I said, okay, all right, what is this? And when we sat down and talked about the gospel in the back of that old chapel at El Reno FCI, it changed my life. And I thank God for him, and I thank God for that particular day with destiny that he had on my calendar that I know about.
When you also said, I can remember this clearly, that you questioned some of the people in there when they said they knew what the meaning of traveling with the Lord or something like that. You're like, man, y'all don't,
Yeah. How many people have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ?
Right.
All his hands went up, and I'm looking around. I didn't put my hand up. I'm saying, these guys, right, whatever. And then he said, with KWAME, that's what he called it, KWAME. You don't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? And I said, no, I don't even know what that means. I don't. And I said, I don't think these dudes do either.
Right.
I don't think they just talking.
They just talking, yeah.
At this point, I'm irritated. I'm just,
right.
I don't know. Whatever gonna happen is gonna happen. I don't care about none of these people. And so he was like, finally, some honesty in this place. He was a charged up. I'm talking about, sergeant in the military. He was something. But I had to have a tough guy because I always thought that you know, the men, it was a few for sure, but most of the men that were standing for Christ were kind of soft to me. They were clean, puffy. And I just didn't, they never, so I needed that kind of guy, military guy who was just radical about it, revolutionary about it, but still a man. And I had to see that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was tailor-made. And there was other guys there, John Cotton, who was a lifer there, a man's man, but also just absolutely sold out for Jesus Christ.
That's the guy from Houston, right?
Yeah, that's my man from Houston. And so he's out. We just talked yesterday. So
okay. Do you speak with the minister guy that you
talking about with Bruce?
Yeah.
I talked to Bruce when I got out.
Okay.
You know, they're not allowed to communicate with us for about a year.
I got
so
you.
Through some family members, I was able to talk to him for a second. So I can talk to him now. So I'm actually about to reconnect with him.
Okay. Well, cool, man. Man, I want to jump into this book and talk a lot about it. But I want to kind of start off with, you know, I noticed throughout the book, all your analogies and metaphors, especially when it comes to music, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I really like that. But before I get even started with that, tell me, what was it like, you know, growing up in Detroit, man, you know, during the time that you know, was growing up high school and all that. Make sure that you like and subscribe and hit the all button and all that kind of stuff, because we're going to have a lot of good interviews on this podcast.